Innovation Initiative Senior Fellow at CEPA, Viktoras Daukšas, Head of the Debunk EU Initiative, Linas Petkevičius, lecturer and researcher at Vilnius University, who is also the board member of Artificial Intelligence Association of Lithuania, and Paulius Jurčys, co-founder of Prifina. So to start, technological determinists tend to believe that they will be able to solve all the problems regarding these complex sort of societal issues with disinformation with the help of some of the advanced AI technology. However, I would argue that a quick reality check indicates that it's only a technology and in many cases not enough for solving these complex societal problems and challenges. For example, for more than a year, we have been exposed to infodemic, which was following the pandemic that started roughly around 1 year ago. And besides these fundamental sort of technical issues, we also have we don't have a deep understanding of the problem itself that we want to solve together with these technical limitations. For example, data issues and other things. So I think that as a researcher who deals with this information every day, I see this AI not only as a potential solution to some of the problems. We do use some AI products in our work to detect this information, but we also see that some AI-driven mechanisms, AI-driven systems are being used to cause the problem itself. Account automation, deepfakes are just the tip of the iceberg that we see every day. And this is basically what we would like to discuss today. What are the key challenges that AI is creating in the sphere of disinformation? How can we use to solve some of these problems, and what should we be wary of? So we will start our discussion with short opening statements from our panelists, and I would like to introduce Ben, who's not only a fellow at CEPA, but he's also a CTO and founder of Omelas, a firm that provides data and analysis on how states manipulate the web to achieve their geopolitical goals. So the floor is yours, Ben.
Great. Thanks so much, Lukas. Thanks for having me here, and very excited to discuss really challenging topic. It's easy to look at the AI-built internet today and submit to pessimism and cynicism. For over a decade, I've seen the internet at its worst. I began my career tracking the forums of jihadists, where the world's most repulsive acts were met with praise and adulation. I watched in horror as the AI that underpinned Twitter connected the world's most gruesome imagery to the world's most bloodthirsty, drawing hundreds from around the globe to commit untold atrocities. For the past half decade, I've watched as the AI that drove YouTube's astronomical growth brought Russian state propaganda outlets to the apex of influence in global news, while the AI that helped Facebook connect 2 billion people also so privileged fake news that by every measure, it dominated and continues to dominate real news. In 2014, Nikolai Boryuzha, the Secretary General of CSTO, declared that, quote, "In an information war, the one who tells the truth will always lose, for he's bound by the truth, while the liar may proclaim whatever he wishes." Seeing AI's impact on disinformation so far, many across the world have accepted this vision, that disinformation inevitably beats truth, that a connected world is a more dishonest world. But the internet that we have today and the AI that makes it run is contingent, not necessary. Like all AI, it's the result of human decisions, and human decisions can and have deployed AI to create a better internet. Today's most powerful AI that controls the information flow worldwide was built to maximize growth and engagement. While giving the edge to disinformation was never the intention, it was an acceptable byproduct. Boryuzha was right to a degree. Lies are limitless, the truth is bounded. If the goal is to spread fastest, lies will easily sweep away the truth. But since the dawn of the Enlightenment, in academies and labs, and even corporations, establishing truth as the guiding star has proven that we can overcome the advantage of bad information. To see this applied online, we need not imagine a system totally foreign to our own, but rather turn to some of the world's most popular websites. The world's 13th most popular website, with 1.7 billion unique visitors every month, is Wikipedia. By applying the standards of the analog world, human verification, citations, clear editorial guidelines, and using AI only to automate the repetitive processes that humans already know backwards and forwards, Wikipedia has created an environment where truth besting falsehood is the norm. With 41 million users making 17 million edits monthly, Wikipedia sets lie to the assertion that scalability and human oversight are incompatible. From Stack Overflow to Google Translate, many of the world's leading websites set truth as the priority rather than an afterthought, and consistently turn the connections of hundreds of millions of people into spaces where disinformation flounders and the truth prevails. To make the internet more Wikipedia and less Twitter doesn't require censorship or changes in content moderation, but rather changes in what content is amplified and what content is suppressed. Arriving at this new internet diminishes the profitability of some of the world's largest companies, and so it will be a long struggle of years and even decades. As we push for a better future, though, we must work within the information environment we have now to mitigate the harm today. At Omelas, we combine human verification, analog citations, and AI to understand influence operations launched by Russia, by China, and other malicious actors and their influence in national debates. We combine our AI analysis with in-depth human-made analysis, itself buttressed by AI, to give our users a full understanding of the human elements driving information warfare. AI doesn't replace the human element. It automates the repetitive human tasks so that humans can devote their time to the strategic thinking needed to combat authoritarianism. So when our AI detects influence operations, we ensure humans verify it before we add anything to our database. We only follow accounts that humans have verified belong to malicious actors. Our work has revealed how Russian narratives about Euromaidan seeped into the American national conversation, how China's propaganda machine came to control Facebook's foremost followed news pages, and has given our research and government partners the information they need to respond and to measure their responses. We continue to work towards a better internet, and in doing so, try to practice what we preach. We use AI in collaboration with human-led scientific process to discern the truth. AI has a huge role to play in fighting disinformation, but it's as a sidekick to human intervention.
Oh, thank you, Ben. It's fascinating. I will be very interested to learn more about your Russian and disinformation work. Next up, we have Merle, who has served as the director of NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn. Merle, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Lukas. Thanks for having me as part of this very distinguished panel on a very relevant topic. Building on what Ben said, and definitely I agree with the fact that AI can't replace humans. I thought of focusing in my intro remarks on the aspects of social media companies who are on the very forefront of the disinformation battle and are often criticized for their content policies. So what are some of the issues there? So I discussed about content moderation, about social media algorithms, the algorithmic filtering. So there is no uniform standard for content moderation, resulting in practices varying across social media sites. Social media operators rely on several sources to identify content, to flag or remove, and these sources are first users, secondly content moderators, and thirdly automated systems or AI. Users can flag or mark inappropriate posts for content moderators to review and remove when applicable. And so can the automated systems. For example, in the first quarter of 2020, AI technology flagged 99% of violent and graphic content and child nudity on Facebook for review before any user reported it. But in contrast, Facebook's AI technology identified only 16% of bullying and harassment content. So I think this demonstrates that there are some aspects where the AI is useful, and there are others where content moderators, the humans, are better to identify policy violations. By relying more heavily on automated systems, social media operators may mistakenly remove or fail to remove content. Some social media operators have altered their content moderation practices over time. For example, in 2019, Twitter and Instagram released new policies to review bullying and hate speech on their sites because some of these, that was in response to criticism for allowing hate speech, particularly against Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, that spread on Facebook. Some operators have reconsidered their approach to trade-offs between free expression and safety, such as taking a harder line with removing misinformation, the focus of our topic today. For example, Facebook partners with third-party fact-checkers to review and rate the accuracy of articles and posts, placing those identified as false lower in users' news feeds. In addition, Facebook includes information about the publisher or articles posted on its site and displays articles from the third-party fact-checkers below posts on the same topic. Also, for example, Twitter labels content containing misleading information or disputed claims that it determines to be moderately harmful, while removing misleading content that it determines to be severely harmful. So these actions have been taken voluntarily by them, as a result of, again, criticism. So let's focus a little bit on the social media algorithms. The platforms are shaped by the structures of their user networks and computational tools, such as algorithmic filtering that operators use to manage large volumes of user-generated content continually posted on the sites. Both network structure and computational tools are intended to increase the number of users and user engagement. These components allow operators to increase their revenue. They want to make money, particularly for those who have online advertisements on their platforms. But it may also increase the spread of misinformation that increases user engagement. Each social media operator balances incentives to moderate and prioritize content to increase user engagement and its revenue. Operators use algorithms to sort, to index, to curate and prioritize user content. And as well as to suppress illegal and other content the operator chooses to moderate. Social media operators can change or refine their algorithms to meet evolving business goals in response to internal business incentives, as well as a result of external pressures, such as user complaints or stakeholders' complaints, affecting what users see and what content is privileged and promoted, and what content rapidly spreads across the platform, or so to say, goes viral. For example, Facebook states that its newsfeed prioritizes recent content that is found to be relevant to the user based on factors such as previous engagement with a content provider. The algorithms also may prioritize content that is likely to sustain user engagement, such as sharing, commenting on, or reacting to content. And as a last point on some of these pain moments, bots. Bots can post or amplify content by engaging with it. For example, a bot may be programmed to search for and respond to posts containing specific words or phrases. This can cause algorithms used by social media operators to inadvertently prioritize misinformation. Users and social media operators can recognize some internet bots based on various factors, such as the used syntax in sentences, or the user's profile or abnormal account activity. However, the bots are becoming more and more sophisticated, making it more difficult for users and content moderators to recognize them. So I guess we all, the more in this media literacy week, I don't know, at least we in Estonia have this week sort of like more conscious use of media. I guess we all bear some responsibility in recognizing bots and removing them, at least in and pointing them out. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, that's a great idea, something that we should implement in Lithuania, I think, as well. Viktoras, you have over 13 years of experience in development of online technologies, and you're sort of the brain behind the Lithuanian solution to this information problem, the Debunk.eu. I would like to invite you to give your opening remarks.
Thanks, Lukas, for a nice intro. And thanks for organizing the event on this really important topic and at these weird times. So just getting a short intro. So I will speak more about how AI can be used to counter disinformation and how we use it in Lithuania and other countries that we work in to make our life easier, to work less and do more analysis. So basically now we work in 6 countries and we deployed our technology all around there. And we concentrate mostly on disinformation analysis in multiple countries to spot these influence campaigns, to expose them and present the results to public and our stakeholders there. What's our good practice? And so good practice is working a lot on process perfection. How do we perfect the process so it would be much easier for us to work and we could deliver the analysis faster so the stakeholders could make their decisions and move forward as the time goes. So what we do, so we monitor more than 2,000 outlets that publish disinformation. We analyze hundreds or thousands of different groups and pages in Facebook that tend to publish mis and disinformation. And we analyze all of that content in 26 languages. So what AI can help us to do? AI can automate some of the features that are already perfected by people. As Ben mentioned, it makes sense to automate the things that are done manually and then later save time for human analysts, for volunteers to do what they came to do the analysis. So AI helps to recognize different harmful narratives. We mapped like 25 narratives that tend to repeat every month, every day, every year. And we are mapping out them and underneath the sub-narratives that are the actual messages. In the messages level, there are hundreds or even 1,000 messages. It depends on different analysis. So how it works, we use AI to put all the information in different buckets to find the most harmful, to run the scoring mechanism that will be reviewed later by volunteers and the actual analysts. Then we come back to the process that is called analysis and also data labeling. The articles are analyzed manually, reviewed, read, and labeled with all the problems that are found there. From all of this material, then we produce the charts, and then we move forward to publish the reports and cooperate with media to spread them. Use of AI, so we have 2 processes. One is discovery and another is the analysis. In discovery process, we can use methods that are less precise because we need to find something that we might not know what we are searching. Therefore, the algorithms cannot be very precise and that's not their task. So it's quite open. It can be 50, 60, 70% accuracy. Basically, we just find what's potentially harmful. Then people, our volunteers or our analysts are reviewing that and labeling. As for analysis process, we can only automate something that we are 99 or 100% sure of the accuracy rate. Therefore, here automation is much harder, and we tend to automate kind of smaller tasks that actually save time for human analysts. It's really important to work on the methodology. How do you analyze information? How do you make different people to understand different things in the same way? I think this is really important because if multiple researchers are working on report analysis and they understand things differently, you might end up in quite a big problems. We use 7 disinformation techniques to map out the usage of there in the content that's spread in social media or in hostile media. Previously, we used 11, but due some overlap and some confusion for different analysts, later we reduced to 7, and that works much, much better. We do a lot of reports on COVID disinformation, so we published already more than 20, and we found more than 4,000 cases of mis and disinformation on this topic. Even if we just take this February, we found more than 81,000 articles that were about COVID in the hostile media. We took the 6,000 that we predicted to be the most harmful ones, and in those we found 1,400 cases of mis and disinformation. Also, we worked to measure the reach, what was the outreach of disinformation and misinformation, how many articles were written, and how much exposure it had to citizens. When we analyze the narrative, so it's always good to concentrate what are the most harmful narratives, and then to find the content pieces that spread those narratives, then to analyze them and expose them. This helps to focus where are the hostile actors or authoritarian regimes concentrating on, and it's not necessary by the number of articles that is written. It depends a lot on in how big accounts, in how big websites are they published. Therefore, we map out all of this and we can measure each narrative and sub-narrative and present the actual result, what impact it made. Then we present the cases, which helps a lot to understand better what's actually happening, what's being claimed, what's the verdict, what was true, what's not. And this works very good as educational material. One more thing that is important, so it's important to train different analysts to work on this. Otherwise, we might end up with a problem then different people are interpreting the same things differently. So the training and the examination or certification for disinformation analysts or laborers or reviewers of the content in any social media or other organizations, I think it's very important. Otherwise, there might be big quality problems. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Linas, who's a deep learning practitioner, but also a lecturer with experience in various fields, including robotics, as well as medical image analysis. Linas, please, the floor is yours.
So thanks for nice introduction. So basically, as a research scientist, it's fabulous to see that in recent years, various new technologies emerged. And from scientific point of view, it's really nice to see that every day you could find multiple new articles, new preprints, new open source solutions to create new things. But on the other hand, if the technology is used not properly, it could create a lot of damages. So basically what we're seeing in the last 5-7 years is that all the sensoric information that we are accustomed to validate really quickly. So basically the vision, the understanding of the language and the speech to recognize whether the given voice are proper. We usually were able to identify and verify really quickly. But currently there's so much new data-driven technologies that this task is even hard for all, not only automated tools, but even us as a human beings. So basically, it is fascinating that we could see multiple new technologies that could be used within a simple click. So basically, this week I just take a selfie and try to one of the state-of-the-art models which is generating the faces. And actually, what I found that even this my selfie was taken this week, the model was able to generate really similar face as mine in pretty good quality. And we're seeing that everything that we're starting by analyzing all the information in our news feeds, we basically all the times try to verify whether the profiles and the information are valid, and not only the text information, but then visual information might mislead us. So basically, what we're seeing is that various new models, including the speech generation and voice adaptation and the cloning, is developed in recent years too, and it is really scary if you are listening some additional news or the podcast. You never can be sure that the voice is not generated from the given text. So while we have the ability to more or less separate and in more detail to figure it out, the small details within the computer vision or the speech, it is more hard problem to identify the problems and the inaccuracies within the text. And what has happened in last few years, that was breakthrough technologies introduced in the natural language processing field. And in this case, if you just take publicly available models, you would see that without proper checking, you probably not necessarily will be able to check whether the generated text is really good and written by a human. And it is really scary if these tasks are used in not correct way. And one of the most interesting statistics was that one of the most popular models as a service, basically the GPT-3 model, is generating about 4.5 billion words per day. And this just a simple amount which is generated from one service. And there's much more open source models which can be used by enthusiasts or even professionals. So in this case, we're having a really huge problem by a lot of information flow which is generated and not true. So from this point, since we have a lot of information which is generating, the most difficult challenge becomes when our news feeds become personalized. So every time we take a perturbation of the news flow, and every time we're seeing different combination of the possible news or possible information in our news feeds, we have exponentially larger amount of the data. And from this point, everything becomes much more harder, because if you have really concentrated information flow, it is much more easy to hide various misleading information which is adapted to your own preferences. So in this case, obvious problems can be seen that even some regulations might not necessarily keep up with all the new technologies, and AI, especially in this field, have a lot of gray areas. So if we just take at the main challenges that we probably will face in near future, so obviously the issues to adapt and update all the forensic methods are really important, because then the amount of information that is shown is really large. And you can imagine if the 7 billion people have the personalized information flows, it is really hard problem to find this information in this type of amount of the data. So that's it.
Perfect, thank you. That's actually fascinating. I have not heard that much about voice mimicking, so that's a completely new field for me as well. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Paulius, who is a co-founder of a San Francisco-based data technology company called Prifina. His main areas of expertise are data privacy law, intellectual property, copyright, and innovation. Paulius, the floor is yours.
Great, great. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm trying to follow up already these excellent presentations that were ahead of me. So I will speak more or less from the legal and regulatory point of view. What are the key themes that lawyers are talking about in terms of new types of disinformation and how we can approach it? And I would like to begin by mapping out 5 core themes that, in my opinion, could also help us better shape this discussion and probably guide us a little bit further. So firstly, I'd like to remind that problems related to dealing with deepfakes or misleading information are actually not new, right? If we look back to the oldest historical records, we can find evidence about political fights and instances of lying and defamation in oldest records of our civilization. But what is new is this advancement of digital technology that has led to the creation of new forms of disinformation, such as deepfakes, fake data, and sources through which these fake news, fake information could be instantly made ubiquitous. And as one of my acquaintances has once said, you know, the germs are ours. So the bacteria is ours, but Facebook is the wind that helps it spread globally. Now, the second point, at least from legal perspective, is really this unclear notion of AI. Nowadays, it's really hard to understand what we mean when we refer to AI. It has become such a buzzword that it's really hard to discern at what point a random script could be defined as artificial intelligence. Then, for our purposes today, if we humans find it challenging to discern what is true and what is credible, some may argue that it's probably even less likely to entrust AI to perform this task. Furthermore, once we develop some AI tools that should help us deal with falsehoods, we also need to identify certain quality filters, quality measures to determine what is true, what is correct, what is accurate. And then once information meets these predetermined requirements, you know, this kind of information should be deemed true, and everything else should be false, right? Or misleading or not accurate. The third area, which is also fascinating, is this semantic aspect, which also relates to the behavioral perspective of individuals. So from the semantic point of view, there is always this question, how to understand what certain person is saying or what is the meaning of text, right? If really, is this an honest statement or is it a sarcasm? Is it a parody? Sometimes it's really even difficult for a human being to understand. Then certain facts are really easy to verify. For example, the number of casualties in car accidents or the number of deaths during COVID time. However, other facts are really difficult to identify, right? So, for example, how did COVID affect the mental well-being of individuals during this year? And from behavioral point of view, I think we should talk about truth bias. So I will give you an example. If I say that I was the best student in my class, and then immediately I tell that it was a lie, you know, what will you remember? It's behavioral bias. People tend to remember this statement that I have just made, even though I confirm that it is false. And the same is for other types of statements, right? If a president whom we should rely upon and trust argues that COVID is a hoax and this doesn't happen, or climate change is not real, and then immediately states that, oh, I was joking, you know, so there are some behavioral lessons we have learned from psychology that people really tend to remember this initial statement. So from legal point of view, we need to think, you know, what is this imminent regulatory measure we should think of or try to think of when we're thinking about misinformation. Then with regard to this semantic behavioral aspect, there is another question from moral philosophy. What is wrong with lying or these falsehoods or misinformation? And probably two most impressive or impactful arguments is that, firstly, falsehoods or fake news, deep fakes, are really dishonest, right? It's treating me as a subject, not as an end. And secondly, obviously, it has this fundamental problem that when we are dealing with so many sources of fake information, it becomes really difficult for people to stand on their feet. There is no common ground that holds the society together. The fourth argument is very brief. We have so many stakeholders that are involved in this whole information ecosystem. So we, of course, have individuals who, are basically consumers of information, but also turn into, sources of information. Then we have governments that should, on one hand, we can argue that government should somehow supervise, surveil. At the same time, government could be also the source of, uncertainty. Then we have platforms and other intermediaries who try to argue and strongly argue that they are just platforms, that they should not be subject to this duty, fiduciary duty to regulate. But actually, we have seen, and I will talk later, how it has resulted when we think from the global or societal point of view. And finally, I would like to encourage us to think positively. So given that, we are living in this rapidly changing social, economic, and technological environment, we all witness the risks and dangers. It has also become clear that we need to think out of the box. We need to be creative and be courageous, trying to figure out what are the most efficient and effective tools to deal with the current information problems. And, I think we should not only talk about this negative surveillance and negative impact that we are facing today, but also look to the current reality as an opportunity that we can rely on new technologies, and also from legal point of view, from policy making point of view, try and use this as a stepping stone to create better regulatory and technological environment. So that's my short introduction, and thank you.
Thank you, Paulius. These are really good points. Actually, I wrote some down for myself as well whenever I'm being asked about what are the main problems about disinformation. So thank you. So to open our discussion, I would like to say that I'm a big fan. I really like the fact that we have a really good mix of experts coming from all walks of life, meaning representing practitioners, representing academia, people from think tanks, from the government. So to start off, I would like to ask you all, and please stay brief in your answers, to use a bit of maybe speculation, but I would like to see how each of you see the future in 5 years and the accessibility and distribution of AI tools in different sectors, such as government, private sector, media, etc. As this is a vastly, almost exponentially growing field, I would like to see how you envision not so distant future. Let's start with Ben.
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, I think Linas really hit the nail on the head with his presentation. Natural language generation is such a huge threat and really doesn't get nearly as much attention as I think it deserves. If you look at the flow of disinformation so far, it's really not that the creators of disinformation are using super convincing Photoshops to convince people that an image is real when it isn't. It's mostly articles that are doing the heavy lifting, or tweets or Facebook posts. So being able to create messaging that's really tailored to an individual that you can run A/B testing on in 1,000 different permutations to find the one that's going to get the most shares and drive the most engagement, I think is a huge danger. So just want to thank Linas for bringing that up as something we should really look out for. On the more positive side, there definitely are a lot more people working in this space and working to figure out how to find a more truth-based information system. And you see all sorts of alternative media ecosystems popping up that are really focused on in-depth, thoughtful reporting, as opposed to just the kind of quick very flattened, very outrage baity type of media that really gets thrown around on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So my hope is that this new generation of media, along with the influx of people coming into this field and trying to figure out how to deploy AI to make a healthier media ecosystem, leads to something where we look back at today in the past 5 years as kind of a untamed Wild West, and we get to someplace where true information is able to really reassert its role as the guiding force for people.
All right, thank you, Ben. Merle, what are your predictions?
Well, if I'm thinking like where I see developments going in the field that's closest to my heart, the cybersecurity, then I see AI or the automation already being in use, and that's quite okay. I mean, we are dealing with, first, regarding the data. I mean, there are larger and larger quantities, and so everything related to the search and the better use is getting more and more automated. Autonomy is widely used in measures such as in cybersecurity, for example, a firewall that detects suspicious packets of network traffic and removes them from incoming traffic. It can be considered autonomous in these functions as it operates without the intervention of human operator. And in fact, the system administrator can never find out what packets were removed unless they specifically look it up. Or then another example of such an internally functioning autonomous agent would be a program that detects instances of unauthorized access and deletes the data contained in a database on detecting suspicious access pattern. So in these elements of firewalls, intrusion detection and prevention systems, AI automation is in use and will certainly be on the rise.
Thank you. Viktoras?
Thanks for a good question. So I would say that we will see just an exponential increase in use of AI. I think that biggest part of society clearly doesn't understand how much AI touchpoints they already have. So I just Googled that currently in the world, 4.88 billion people have smartphones, which is 62% of all world's population. So if the person has a smartphone, clearly there is some AI already involved. So even from this number, we can say that more than 60% of world's population already have some touch points with AI. And most of these phones have apps, some social media apps that they use to track friends, content, see what's happening around the world. So the use of AI, it's already at very large scale. 60% of all population already in touch with it, and it makes a great impact. Over the next 5 years, we will see growth. Maybe it will grow to 70, 80% of all population that has the smartphones and can use all these different applications that use AI. From perspective of threats, I see that it's like having two camps. One camp is countering disinformation, other camp is creating disinformation to deceive people, earn money from that, and this trend will just keep the same. We will still have this arms race on both sides. I really hope that in next 2.5 years, EU will pass smart regulations, how disinformation and misinformation should be regulated in EU. That could be a breakthrough of how our future evolves. So looking forward to that. And just a comment on text generation and deepfakes. Both sides have capacity to use technologies. I see the biggest problem is that authoritarian governments have just much bigger, nearly kind of unlimited resources to spread disinformation, and our side has comparatively just drops in the sea levels of money to counter that. So I see this as a trend. It's not a new trend. I don't think it ever was differently, so it's the same thing. So this should change, and then we can counter better. And from text generation, I wouldn't be that apocalyptic, so it can be that bad. I don't think it will be that bad. And just, remember, we live in the Baltics, and the small languages on any NLP or any generation works terrible. Kids write better. So it's not that bad. So it's not that dark. And and another problem with that is that, social media, therefore, like when Facebook rolls out or Twitter rolls out new updates, therefore those updates reach the small languages much, much later. That's another problem. But yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Viktor, as well. It is good to hear that this information is not going anywhere, and I'm going to keep my job as a debunker. So great news. Linas, what are your predictions?
So we clearly are going to some uncertainties and uncharted waters with so much new generated information. And I am cautious about various things, because if you cannot control a lot of things, it might become challenging. And for this, I'm seeing a few few issues that might arise in near future. So first, obviously, it is really clear that our regulation in general is not able to keep up with the new technologies. A lot of technologies and a lot of applications which developed in recent years are quite recent and quite new, and already started to raise some problems, and not all of the applications are known how to be regulated, and a lot of things are in gray area. But on the other hand, we cannot adapt everything into the governmental or the public sector, because sometimes and very often AI as a solution require some initial research, and usually you need to create your own model to classify and filter the news. You need to try to collect some data of your preferences for your own research, and if the model is not really good, and it's not a certified product, there's some limited possibilities to apply within the public sector, unless it is have the resources to do their own research. So there's some lagging problems that could catch up later. But on the other hand, from the science and the researcher point of view, there's a slight gap which is emerging between the normal researchers and normal computing powers that we have and have ability to reach, what can you do with your own laptop or PC, and what can be done with a lot of research, a lot of resources and a lot of data. So if the institution or government or some specific company have the really large resources and ability to collect a lot of data, annotate a lot of data, so obviously the gap, what can be done with those resources, is really large, and this is really concerning that in the future there might be really widespread for us to catch up.
Thank you, Linas. And Paulius, what do you think 5 years from now will look like?
So I will just follow up as well, since we're generating so much more data nowadays, and it is very clear that more and more data is going to be generated. It's obvious that also we have more AI applications and applicabilities. The challenges will be how to place AI tools, if any, are developed within the right stakeholders who are actually capable and willing to utilize AI tools for, making sure that we are identifying the sources of fake information and doing necessary corrections. The other challenge, or probably a task for all of us, is to make sure that somehow we're able to achieve more transparency in those AI tools, because probably the most unclear factor nowadays is how are those big platforms that are actually utilizing AI to identify information. We do not really know how the algorithms are written, what factors are taken into account, and then it causes some kind of, probably uncertainty, if not mistrust. So I guess the challenge is that, of course, we should promote using technologies to make sure that more accurate information is provided, but also we should strive for more transparency.
Thank you, Paulius. Well, the next part of the discussion is I have a bunch of personalized questions that I can't wait to ask you, but I know that Merle will have to jump off soon, so I would like to start with her and give her a question. From your experience in the COE, you were in a unique position to help NATO allied countries and NATO militaries to adapt to the cyber challenges, and some of the challenges maybe were AI related. So, in your own words, what is the status of our current efforts? What is the status of our NATO allied militaries to respond to these challenges, and where do you see the biggest problems and the biggest sort of the biggest bets, the biggest battles in the future?
Thanks for the question. I think from the perspective of the NATO CCD COE, or the Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, allies are doing pretty well in cyber. And here I should, of course, remark that the NATO Cyber Center in Tallinn in Estonia is not the only place taking this joint effort forward for NATO allies, but even more so, closer relevance to our topic today would be the work of the NATO Center of Excellence on Strategic Communications in Latvia, in Riga. But of course, which focuses on much more on disinfo, while we in Estonia work more on the military cyber defense, so to say. And where I think the center in Estonia is really doing well, and together with all the allies, is in cyber defense exercises, because that's where first you build trust, you build a community, you learn to know each other. It's a good old Estonian sort of like tradition, maybe Baltic, to kind of like work together and thereby develop bonds, and like exercising together is that. And secondly, so you build trust and you learn to know how other nations react. You learn better about their procedures, their ways of reacting to various sort of like crisis situations. So more specifically, I'm referring to the world's largest and most comprehensive cyber defense exercise that is being organized by the NATO Cyber Center in Tallinn, called Locked Shields, which has basically two levels. It has first this red against blue exercise dimension, which in short sort of like aims to help to improve the response of the hands-on keyboard people, so to say, to put it very simply. And then it also includes the strategic element to it, the tabletop exercise part of the same exercise, which helps to improve the non-tech teams and the executive response. And it is at the second level that the misinformation or more elements are also included in the scenario. This tabletop is building on the they are both connected, and at this executive front, basically the outputs basically the exercise is evolving around four categories. First is time, which is how much time would you need for various decisions to be taken during cyber crisis, and how far ahead can plans be made in cybersecurity. Secondly, it's about authority. So the question is, who within your organization, teams, national teams are playing it, so who in your nation has the authority to execute crucial decisions during a cyber conflict, and in what circumstances could the authority be delegated up or down, and whether the existing decision-making frameworks and national legislation provides appropriate framework for this handling these emergency situations. The third element is cooperation, which is about who are the necessary allies and partners and how can nations work together. And last but not least, the most relevant to our today's topic is transparency, which deals with the question of public exposure of the decision making, how can what can and should be shared, and how to debunk sort of fake news, how to identify fake news, and how to communicate about them. So this is something that is being tested annually, and I think it should, because ultimately in the real world crisis also growingly cyber and disinfo components are a part of our crisis, and what we can do today is to prepare through engaging in realistic exercises. Thanks, and with that I have to apologize, I really need to run off.
Thank you, Merle, so much for your answers. I just wanted to say that I have a deep admiration for COEs as a product. I had opportunity to spend some time both in Vilnius COE, the energy security, but also in Riga and Stratcom COE. And these organizations where you have both civilians and military people working together actually, I think is a great solution to a lot of problems. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, you have experience in working with disinformation from not the most sort of democratic countries, right? Including Russia. I wanted to ask, where do you see the main weak spots in the Western countries' response to AI enhanced disinformation?
Yeah, so it varies a lot from country to country, and for the most part, what Russia is incredibly effective at is finding the real world breakpoints within a country and really aggravating them incredibly effectively. So if you take the example of really any of the Baltic countries, Russia has this built-in advantage with the Russian minorities there, that the wide majority of Russian content being produced anywhere in the world is being produced either by the Russian government or by organizations like National Media Group that have very close ties to the Russian government. And there's this golden rule of social media marketing that 80% of your content should delight, inform, or inspire, and only 20% should actually be about your brand. So because channels like Prvý Kanál or Rutsy Din are producing like the best reality shows in the Russian language, are producing best entertainment in the Russian language throughout the Baltics, native Russian speakers are going to go to those channels initially for the entertainment, but then also they're going to stick around for the news, or they're going to follow it for updates on their favorite reality shows online. And then the news is going to be inserted into those pieces, the entertainment. And so that creates this environment where Russians in Lithuania, or in Latvia or in Estonia or in Ukraine, when there is real world conflict between Russia's portrayal of events and the portrayal of EU members, they're just going to naturally be primed to accept that Russian interpretation of events. You see a somewhat similar thing within the United States, that Russia from the early 2010s was able to establish itself as the bulwark of traditionalism. And Putin gave this big speech in 2013 about how the world isn't divided between countries anymore, but within countries, between traditionalists and progressivists. And within the United States, that is a very real tension. That's something that Trump was able to really hit on. And Russia had been amplifying that message. They had built an entire media ecosystem of traditionalists that were appearing on RT, on Sputnik for years and years, and had already become kind of the one-stop shop for digital traditionalists. So they were able to exert a lot of influence by taking advantage of these real world issues, but also combining it with this sense of showmanship, this sense of entertainment that they do for their Russian language content by bringing on these kind of conspiracists that toe the line between political and apolitical, like, yeah, Bigfoot is kind of funny to talk about, so is Area 51, but it's also contributing to the sense that the government is trying to hide something from you and really can't be trusted. So it's really what they're really effective at. No, the question was about AI, but it's really the social networks, their AI, that's able to connect them to these either conspiracists, traditionalists, ethnic Russian minorities, that really enables what they're doing manually to be effective. So, like I was saying in my opening remarks, what's really effective about Russian IO is they have humans doing the part that humans are really good at, and they don't have AI trying to do everything.
Yeah, what I really like from what you're saying, and what is really fascinating to me, is how many correlations there are between actual marketing and disinformation. And actually, sometimes we might look to marketing for ideas how to understand and how to step in to disturb some of these disinformation campaigns. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Viktoras, from talking with a man who basically from scratch created a really impressive AI-based tool, what are the limitations that you see of AI as a sort of a solution to disinformation? Where do humans still have to step in? And do you think that in our lifetimes we'll see AI doing most of the job, or the elves and the analysts are still going to be part of the solution?
Yeah, there is this weird perception that maybe it's from movies, that AI will solve everything, or AI will take over the world. And but AI or humans are not that different. Every person is trained to do something, is educated to do something, and to do something well. It's very similar with the algorithm. The algorithm is just a smaller piece trained to do some specific function very well. So, over a few thousands of our years of evolution, humans improved a lot, but there is no human who knows everything. Therefore, there is also no AI who knows everything, or no algorithm that can solve any problem that exists in the world. So I don't see that as a possibility. I see that it's a human enhancement with AI features that helps to improve the processes of our daily life. So that's the direction where everything is going. So AI is not taking over the world. Humans with enhanced with AI capacity are taking over the world. So that's the direction I see very logical, and we see a lot of evidence and real possibilities to do that. And it makes sense, improve the work of analysts to show them AI can find really well patterns. So humans are good to find patterns, but AI can do that at scale. So just go over the data and show the analysts what's there, or what a new pattern was discovered. Or if there is a mechanical task, you need to go and click there, open that, take over there, change lines or whatever. This can be automated as a process. So I see that there will be more and more process automation features. What's not that good is that there are now more and more possibilities, and it's a bit easier to create this information than to debunk it. I mean that you can take all the disinformation outlets in the world, take all the data that they have, and start to generate new data from these websites just using algorithms. And that can be just copy-pasted by trolls and pasted in all different social media or media comments and spread all around the world. So what I would see as a potential problem is that the algorithms and the use of bots or sock puppets or these automated accounts, this should be somehow regulated. So it's a clearly inauthentic behavior. It's not humans writing those comments, and or not humans liking, sharing, and commenting under these social media posts, and the algorithms tend to be manipulated. So I see this as a problem, and definitely there should be some policy solutions on that. But yeah, we are not going anywhere far from our computers. It seems that we will need to take more sports to be able still to sit by the computers, but there is no machines for taking our jobs yet.
That's good to hear. We're dealing with tools rather than replacements. Wonderful. Sort of to build up on the question, on the answer that Viktoras gave, I wanted to ask Linas. Do you think, well, again, coming from a person who's dealing with disinformation but not AI, do you think that we'll come to a point of automated accounts that will be able to generate content on their own, and content that is actually believable, and that at some point in time we'll be talking with a bot who's generating and talking to you, and there will be no easy way to sort of distinguish between human or not human?
Mm-hmm. So I will try to extend on the Viktoras comments and say that there might be a problem, and the main reason is that actually nowadays the language technologies are improving really significantly. If you just take our today's topic, the AI in age of the disinformation, we could easily generate some random text, which unless you read the text, you wouldn't even say that this is generated artificially. And nowadays it is easy to use techniques and tools, and this is obviously will eventually come up as some bad generated content. And the main problem, as I started to mention in the beginning, in my opinion, is the ability to personalize all the generated information. And the problem occurs that every time we're generating some artificial news or artificial information for any given topic or response, or for the engaging with a person on the comment section, the possibility that emerged in recent years become that now it is possible to calculate the similarity between the text that you know and the text, for example, that you generated. So basically, if you have the ability to receive the semantic similarity, what does it give you? So obviously, you could find all the information that you need by semantic meaning. That's good. But if you just using for the bad purposes, per se, and you're generating like hundreds of thousands various fake information data texts, and then choose the one which is most similar for the specific person, or the person characteristics, or even some reference about the specific domain of information. So for example, you could choose the subset of the data of your choice and find which of the generated fake information is most similar to that. So this is really interesting techniques that emerged in recent years, but at the same time, those are bad examples when that information is much more hidden in the information flow. And from that, you could easily automate the responses on social media by checking which response potentially would had more harmful engagement and so on. So from this point of view, I would say that we will have really increased number of automated bots, and unless we will have at least some legislations, there might come up some small issues with this topic.
This is both fascinating and scary at the same time. Thank you. Paulius, you have unique expertise in law as well as technology, into which I would like to tap in slightly and ask, how do you think, what is the role of social media platforms and governments in addressing regulation of deepfakes? And is reliable regulation currently possible at all?
Great. So I'll quickly share a few slides that I hope will illuminate a little bit some of the issues that are so much discussed today among lawyers and regulators. So just before diving into the legal aspects, I would like to offer this presentation of some of the categories of deepfakes that we can think of. So my favorite deepfake is with this Mr. Bean actor that was whose face was used in Christian Dior's advertising campaign. It was quite entertaining. So some of the deepfakes are really creative and entertaining, used for some artistic or parody purposes. Others are really commercial deepfakes that help achieve some goals and save some cost. Obviously, most frequently discussed deepfakes are used in political sphere and public life that obviously also have a significant impact to our democratic values and how institutions are functioning. And there are also instances of harmful deepfakes, like revenge porn. From this conversation, I would like to remind us that deepfakes is just a category of falsehoods, right? So there are many instances of fake information, misleading information, misstatements. So deepfakes, from a legal point of view, they fall into this broader category that is not entirely new for lawyers. So one of the core legal values that permeates this debate about misinformation and how we should approach it from a regulatory point of view refers to the notion of freedom of speech. And freedom of speech as such is not that old concept. Basically, we can trace the roots to 1960s. In the United States, there was a famous decision of New York Times versus Sullivan. The main idea and the consequence of this decision was that when it comes to liars, we should correct them, but not punish. I think this is quite illuminating statement that helps us understand the goal of at least American constitutional law and freedom of speech, which is to promote the debate among the members of the society. The reason why punishment is deemed dangerous is that by punishing certain types of speech, we're sort of pushing the society towards the situation where there is only one permissible type of opinion, right? So there is this. If we have a punishment as a sanction for certain types of speech, we are kind of nudging the society into one single group which accepts only one statement, which is not fine when we're talking about pluralistic, democratic society. And also, we should understand that falsehoods, from this societal point of view, is the byproduct of free democratic discussion. Then I think the next point I would like to address is that there are so many types of laws and regulations, as well as measures that have been developed over time to deal with falsehoods and misleading information. For example, in private life, we have instances of rules where, for example, misleading commercial statements are also deemed as unworthy of protection, and individuals who are affected by these kind of misleading statements can sue for damages. Also, we have criminal sanctions that try to address certain most egregious misstatements or disinformation. Here is a statement from March 25th hearing that was taking place at the US Senate. And at the opening statement, the chairman of the committee, Frank Pallone, made the following remark. I will quickly read. It's now painfully clear that neither the market nor public pressure will force those social media companies to take the aggressive action they need to take to eliminate disinformation and extremism from their platforms. And therefore, it is time for Congress and this committee to legislate and realign these companies' incentives to effectively deal with disinformation. So this is probably one of the most frequently discussed areas today, how a specific provision of the American Decency Act, Section 230, should be reinterpreted, rewritten to move forwards and to change the current situation where platforms like Facebook or Twitter or YouTube are basically enjoying the carve-out benefits because they are not liable for the content that is posted by the users. Obviously, the most recent political campaigns and issues that we have seen in different countries cause a lot of debate and push forward towards new approach where actually platforms should be deemed more responsible and probably also encouraged to take a more active role. And I have a few more slides with few more ideas. So from constitutional point of view, one of the most famous constitutional scholars has recently proposed the following line of thinking, how we should deal with these fake statements or false information. So briefly, he suggests that we should take into account what is the speaker's state of mind. Is the statement made intentionally, or was it just a reckless statement? Then what is the magnitude of harm? Is it really a huge impact that affects 10,000 or huge population, or is it just a very tiny lie? Then we need to also identify whether the harm is likely and how likely the harm is, whether it's going to occur or not, and if so, who is going to be affected. And then we also need to think about the timing. So if from the timing point of view, a certain misstatement or disinformation leads to imminent harm, then probably it is much more likely that it has to be regulated than statements that lead to harm, let's say in 2 weeks or 2 months. So to sum up, the proposal is that an intentional harm, for example, that is certain to cause serious consequences tomorrow, clearly needs to be regulated. But the disagreement is, who should regulate how? And just to think about the future, I think there are so many points that could be addressed. There are so-called hard interventions like censorship, which is deemed as not appropriate in the 21st century, or punishment, which I also referred before. But we should talk about, educating individuals where they should get primary reliable sources of information. We can talk about architectural interventions like using AI, and then signaling labels, warnings, as we already see Twitter and Facebook utilizing now by providing links where we can find more accurate or reliable sources of data. I think there is so much that we can talk, and I'm running out of time probably, but I would like to come back to this idea that bottom-up and self-regulation by platforms has been found as really disappointing. They have not done enough to prevent the spread of disinformation, and then we need to look for better solutions. I think I would mention one more point that we could think of. There are certainly some situations where certain types of data or statements could be verified directly by the individual. So two-factor authentication is one point, but there are also scenarios where we have data leaks that have been misappropriated by bad actors to create new accounts, new bank accounts, or other types of use cases. Probably the individual should be able in some cases to verify that this kind of use of data is allowed, and this permission should be going through and from the individual directly. So of course it's hard to touch upon everything, but at least it hopefully gives some overview with regard to where we are today and what are the next steps we should think of.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paulius. It's actually really, for me, I completely agree that the media platforms, most of them are not doing enough, but it was and it still is very interesting to see how they evolved from being just mediums for information to an actual players in the field and actually taking up responsibility as a whole. So as we're running out of time, I would like to end up our discussion on sort of giving you a short question for all of you, but also giving you an opportunity to do any final remarks that you would like. And again, please try and be brief. The question from my side is quite broad, but what do you think is our next battle with AI-related disinformation? And let's start with Ben.
Reducing the political power and influence of the big tech companies. They're by far the largest vector for disinformation. Their business model, it's not built on disinformation, but it's very, very hard to disentangle it from disinformation. The fewer people that have their world shaped by news that they're getting from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, the fewer people that are influenced by disinformation.
Thank you, Ben. Viktoras?
I think it's the future, and everything on all the things holds on its education. How people are educated, what do they learn at school, what do they learn at university, what later do they learn in their lives. So I think this is one of the parts that's really important for somehow to integrate more of this information in the schools. Generally, I would say that all of this information environment became a huge and very complex supply chain system. It's really complex. The algorithms, the data flow, the data exchanges, automation procedures, how content is delivered, different personalization mechanisms, and so on. And what I think that there's a lot of people who actually, big part of citizens, they don't understand actually how that works, or why do they see what they actually see. If they would have more awareness, why do they see the content they see? And an example, for example, Facebook quite often advertises for analysts, RT, and other outlets that tend to publish all kind of mis and disinformation because we analyze it, and so we understand why it shows, but how much a typical citizen understands why in his feed some links appear and why they are there, and what is the real interests behind that. So, broadly speaking, if we would solve and we would educate all the people around the world of how to assess information, how to understand what is real, what is not, how to do a very fast fact check, just like Googling Google database of fact checks, or using the claim review scheme to find the fact checks. If we would find a way how to do this, all these problems kind of would disappear. So that is I would like to take this as a perspective, and I really agree what Paulius said about policy and legislation. I think this is really important because tech companies really, they don't have actually this is against their interest to do the changes, because currently there's more money in the way as it is, because it's more engaging. The false information just travels 6 times faster as Twitter measured. So this makes just more money. So we just need to do here some kind of fundamental change. So the tech companies would work on this. That's why I mentioned EU new agreements on how should EU tackle this information. So that's a big deal, and it seems to be moving forward quite well. But even though it's very slow, so we will see results in the next few years. So what I wish more education, faster analysis and debunking, and better regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Viktoras. Linas, what is the next big battle in your eyes?
Yeah. So maybe not necessarily a battle, but just the fact to keep fight the battle. It is really important, and all the deepfakes and similar approaches uses technology of adversarial training, and this is basically is competing of two poles. One is learn to let's say classify whether it's a good content, a bad content, a real face or fake face, and another tries to generate a new better examples. And in this case, we have the similar approach that if we just slow or stop our fight and research would slow down, so obviously that would be a really big problem in such way that new generation techniques would come up, and it would be even more wider problem. So in such way, just keep doing the good job of trying to stop this disinformation and keep going to this way.
All right, thank you. Paulius, what do you see?
First of all, I would like to say that my big wish is to have a crystal ball where I can give you a clear answer. But I think there are 3 points. One is, of course, educating individuals about accessing information, transparency, which I mentioned before. And I think, thirdly, AI could be used probably to promote credible and verified information, not necessarily focus on disinformation. So probably if we can focus on access to credible and reliable sources of truth, then probably this would also lead to some beneficial results. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And on this positive note, I would like to end today's discussion. And well, to say that it was an absolute pleasure to talk with you all today. I personally learned a lot new, and I hope our watchers and listeners will as well. And on this note, I would like to thank you all. Thank you, a huge thanks to our panelists for joining today, and thank you AI Boost for hosting us today. And I wish you all a very productive rest of the week.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.